Welcome to Pensar Basketball Live. Today we are talking about the Toronto Raptors needing a miracle in tomorrow's draft lottery show. If you are not aware, the Pensar Basketball will be live streaming the draft lottery tomorrow starting at 2:30. We're going to get a live reaction. We're going to get a call-in show, so please join us tomorrow at 2:30. If you're new around here, subscribe. I'm going to give you a brief overview today of what the Raptors need, why it might be a good thing that the Raptors lose this pick, or why it might be a great thing if they get it. What is actually present in this lottery, in this draft? What can they expect to get in terms of value? Why might this player be maybe not such a huge addition next year in terms of adding wins? What are the downline implications? What do the Raptors look for in prospects, etc.? So to give you a rough idea in the overview, we're obviously going to talk about the draft lottery process. We're going to talk about the odds. We are going to be talking about the teams picking around us. We're going to talk about the realistic outcome and what is likely to happen tomorrow. We're going to talk about how much young players actually impact winning. We are going to talk about the Winshare argument of bringing in 3 rookies into the same team that already has a lot of question marks. We're going to talk about what the Raptors really look for in terms of, how they determine who they're going to pick. We're going to talk about the player types. We're going to talk about the shooters in this draft because there are plenty of shooters. We're going to talk about the bigs because there are a lot of bigs and they're very different. They come in different shapes and sizes and they thrive in different situations. And we're going to talk about the wings and the guards that attack and how they might fit with the current players that the Raptors have and who they figure to be on the roster next year and how they might have overlapping or underlapping skill sets. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of losing this pick. There are cons, there are pros. We will talk about both. And we will definitely be talking about that pick number 19, which I'm very, very excited about because I am honestly very bullish about the players that are available between 15 and 30 in this draft. And the Raptors have 2 picks, 19 and 31, that I think will both yield excellent prospects. And we're going to talk about the undrafted heap because I actually think that one of the strengths of this draft is range 40 to 75. So, all right, let's talk about this. All right, so we'll start with, first of all, the announcement. Scotty Barnes will represent the Toronto Raptors at the draft lottery tomorrow. That's cool. Looking forward to seeing the big guy, and he was actually a lucky, fortunate. There was a bit of a good fortune for the Toronto Raptors when they picked up Scotty Barnes because they were supposed to pick 7th, and they moved up in the draft all the way to number 4. In fact, 7 has moved up several times. Number 6 has never moved up. And so there's no statistical, argument to be made that 6 is due or that 6 is cursed. It just so happens that 6 has a better chance of moving up than 7. And the last time the Raptors were at 7, they moved up to 4. So, let's hope that this time they get to move up again because Lord knows they moved down in the coin toss. And to those of you who are not aware, the Raptors had a series of coin flips due to a record tie with the Indiana Pacers. Their Indiana Pacers pick went from 16th to 17th to 18th, all the way down to 19th. So the Raptors had basically, they had to lose every single coin flip to get down to 19, and they did. So maybe you got the bad luck out of the way with that first pick, or maybe it is a sign of very, very bad things to come for the Toronto Raptors, who already have had a lot of really, really bad things happen in the last year. So let's talk about this draft lottery process and specifically what I think a lot of people that talk about this don't seem to understand, which is exactly what are the odds? What are the odds and what do they mean? So the exact odds are as follows. The Toronto Raptors are currently situated as 6th. There is no tie. They are clearly behind the San Antonio Spurs, and they're clearly ahead of the Memphis Grizzlies, who they managed to out-tank, which is very fortunate for the Raptors. Now, the Toronto Raptors have a pick that is protected top 6. It is a top 6 protected pick, which means that if it lands between 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it is theirs. If it lands anywhere else, which means the other 3 places it can land, 7, 8, 9, and 10, then it belongs to the San Antonio Spurs. I'm assuming that the Spurs are hoping that this pick conveys because they could really use some talent. They could use some young talent, and they already have a pick, and maybe that will allow them the flexibility to package these picks in case they really, really fall in love with a prospect at the top of this draft. I'm not sure what the Raptors are hoping happens, and we'll take the pros and cons on both sides. However, the least likely outcome in the top 10 for the Raptors is 5. with a 0% chance. The Raptors cannot draft 5th. So you can put that out of your head. They have roughly a 34% chance of drafting in the top 4, which is a 1 in 3 shot of drafting in the top 4. They have 9% shot at first overall pick, 9.2, 9.4, 9.6 at second, third, and fourth subsequently. Their lowest odds, ironically, in the top 8 are at staying at number 6. So if you were betting tomorrow and you cared about numbers and math, you would say the least likely bet would be 6th. Ironically, people always mock them 6th, but that's the least likely outcome. The most likely outcome, unfortunately for the Raptors, is they convey this pick. The second most likely outcome is they also convey this pick. Their most likely outcome tomorrow is 7 or 8. So if we go through the lottery, and the way this works, of course, like the absolute worst outcome for the Raptors would be 10th. Ironically, however, that could be the best possible outcome if you are conveying the pick, that at least, for your own sentimentality and your own, well-being mentally, you're like, we conveyed the 10th pick and we didn't convey the 7th pick. Regardless, this is very simple math, and basically all it means is that you should expect to lose the pick because there is a 45% chance of keeping this pick tomorrow, and there's a 55% chance of losing this pick tomorrow. Because the NBA flattened the lottery odds at the top in order to dissuade teams from tanking, your odds of getting the first overall pick or second overall pick or third overall pick or fourth overall pick are actually not that much worse than Detroit's. Isn't that a little bit crazy? The difference is that because Detroit finished with the worst possible record, their odds of falling outside of the top 5 are nil. That is not the Raptors' odds. So this is really all it means is when the NBA flattened out the lottery odds, it dissuaded teams at the very top from tanking. However, it also added a huge benefit to teams in that 4, 6, 7, 8 range that they had a realistic shot of actually moving up in the draft, which means that last year, had the Raptors managed to tank a little bit at 6, 5, whatever, they would have retained a very, very good shot of actually getting Victor Wembanyama. That being said, let's move on from the lottery odds and let's talk about something else. And that is specifically winning. Does this player necessarily add winning next year? Well, here I've listed out in terms of descending order, ascending order actually, in terms of wins added. Okay. And these are first overall picks, all of them are first overall picks except for Scotty Barnes, who I just added for Raptor fans because he's the highest. He's the second highest actually. RJ Barrett was a third overall pick, but among Raptors draft picks, he's the highest pick we've had in a while. So I just added him for context. I just want to be clear. LeBron James, Scotty Barnes, and Shaquille O'Neal are massive anomalies when it comes to draft picks. So is Wemby. These 4 are all rookies of the year, right? They all won rookie of the year. Paolo, I believe, won rookie of the year as well. These guys added win shares like crazy, right? Anthony Edwards added 0.8 win shares. Anthony Bennett subtracted 0.4 win shares, and Cade was the worst of all with subtracting 0.5 win shares. Imagine tanking, losing 65, 70 games, and then getting a player that helps you lose more games and paying them $12 million to do so. Not the greatest outcome. Now, in the case of Anthony Edwards, it worked out. He worked really hard and he got better and he is turning into a superstar. In the case of Cade Cunningham and Anthony Bennett, jury's still out on Cade, but with Anthony Bennett, it did not work out. And so the cost of all that losing, and you could look at a lot of other players. Andrew Wiggins is another example. Tristan Thompson, not just to pick on Canadians, but there's a lot of guys at the top of the draft. Sheldon Williams. You can go through the list. And if I took the average top 5 pick in NBA history, they do not help you win. The average. And that's in an average draft. This is not an average draft. This is a below average draft. So the odds are that if the Raptors pick in the top 6, they are not going to get a player who's going to make them better next year. At best case scenario, you're going to have an Anthony Edwards as a rookie. That is a very big outcome, which means less than a win added. for $12 million, $11 million, $10 million, $9 million. The odds that a guy like Matas Bazelis, who could barely help a G League team, or Ron Holland, Stefan Castle, who has so many holes in his game. Now, you talk upside, you talk long term, fine. We can talk about that. And those players might end up being really good down the line. But you have to consider next year as well, because it is a part of the journey. What is the player's pipeline, right? So we'll talk about that in the pros and cons, but I just want to clarify, I don't think whoever the Raptors draft, that is going to impact winning very much. Now, here's the Winshare argument against drafting, having 3 draft picks. Every single player on the roster contributes a certain amount to the cumulative number of wins that a team gets. If you're the New York Knicks, a disproportionate number of your wins are going to come from your starters, because your starters are played into the ground. So a guy like OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, they're going to have higher win shares than perhaps teams that have a more egalitarian style. They play deeper into their roster, etc. That all being said, 17 people contribute to what ends up being a total win total at the end of the year. The Raptors already have a bunch of guys who are massive question marks in terms of contributing anything in terms of winning next year. Most specifically, Jalen McDaniels, and potentially Grady Dick. We don't know if Grady Dick is going to be a positive in terms of wins added next year. He's probably going to lose you more games next year than he's going to help you win. There are some notable, question marks on the team. There's probably going to be an undrafted guy. There's probably going to be a free agent signing that doesn't work out. You're not, let me put it this way. You're not the Boston Celtics, where your top 7 is so solid that you're just bringing in 3 guys to replace 3 guys. The problem is, because some of these picks are first round picks and high picks, there would be an expectation that they would have rotation spots. But who are they playing rotation spots over? You're not going to play 12 guys, right? So you're joining, and in the absence of a clearly defined superstar, you don't exactly have a Nikola Jokic or a Giannis Antetokounmpo to raise your floor to the point where you can actually play rookies. The Bucks played a guy like Jordan Nwora, etc. Yeah, he was playing with Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez. You see those level of players on this team? No. So if you had a first overall pick, the expectation would be that player would play 25 minutes. And I would tell you, in those 25 minutes, he's going to probably cost you a ton of wins. Top 6 picks typically play a ton of minutes unless you're competing, unless you're serious about winning. We saw that last year with Anthony Black. He didn't play a lot of minutes, but he did get minutes. He started at times. He does not play in the playoffs, but he started at times. And you can make an argument that Anthony Black is probably better than whoever the hell the Raptors are going to pick this year. Bilal Coulibaly, he played for a tanking team, right? It's very rare that, and if the Raptors are trying to avoid the same disaster outcome that they had this year, they're going to have to pick a lane very early. They're either going to try to bottom out, and good luck on that, because there's going to be a lot of teams that are doing the same thing, or you got to completely clear the lottery next year. You got to go straight for play-in. No more 7, 8, 9, because living out this nightmare of potentially surrendering this pick to the San Antonio Spurs, it's bad with the 2024 draft. You don't want to go through this with the 2025 draft, because I assure you what's on the line is so much greater. So you have to pick a lane, and you have to finish either bottom 3, where you're in like the Detroit, San Antonio sphere, where you can't surrender, or, and you don't want to see that. You might already be too good to do that. And if you add this pick, and subsequently you add the 19th pick and the 31st pick and potentially an undrafted guy, that's 4 roster spots that are potentially going to guys who are going to contribute negative wins next year. Consider the outcome. Your roster currently, as constructed right now, probably could get you 31 wins next year if the NBA decides to tank. Adding 4 players who will subtract from what is already a very small number, which is 31. It's not 60, and you're adding a whole bunch of young guys like the Denver Nuggets with Julian Strawther, etc. So will that change your thinking in terms of maybe with the 19th pick or the 31st pick, you get a very, very, very ready now player? Does it have to? Do you have the development reps? Is everyone going to be 905 bound, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, can you spare it? Because you have one or two injuries and suddenly you're depleted of depth. What I'm saying is the Raptors are not exactly constructed as a team right now because you already have Ochai Abaji, right? Ochai Abaji, Grady Dick, Jalen McDaniels. That's three roster spots that are that are locked into your roster next year unless you trade them. You also have Chris Boucher. None of these guys are cracking a playoff rotation right now. None of them. None of them will be playing on Denver right now. So you make a really, really solid case that unless you're planning to clear house and get a massive talent upgrade through other assets that you have on your roster, you aren't set up to take on three rookies right now and play them all minutes. Do you fit us? Something that I often wonder is how will the Raptors make this decision, right? How much of this will it be all upside? But how much do we consider floor? Because there are prospects in this draft that are hella raw, and they have freakish wingspan, and it comes right down to the Bruno Caboclo thing, right? Can you afford right now, given your lack of upside on your roster, to pass up on high upside prospects? However, given your need to win, you have to balance. Can you consider having a guy who's a complete dud? Doesn't do anything. How much are you going to balance upside versus floor? Need versus timeline, right? You have a need to win to some extent soon. You have a timeline in your head of contention 2026. You don't get endless reps anymore. The league is too deep, too talented. The world is too large. You don't get any more Malachi Flynn type, flyers where you take a guy 28th, doesn't work out year 1, doesn't work out year 2, doesn't work out year 3, he gets traded year 4. Now, I think if the Raptors can reframe their brains a little bit, I think it might be better to have a little less patience with certain players, right? You have 1-2 years to crack it. You don't show anything, you move on, right? And that's kind of where they were with Ron Harper. They don't mind moving off of second round picks and low, like undrafted guys quickly. They moved off of guys like David Johnson pretty quickly. It was like 1 year and boom, off the roster. Didn't show it, didn't have it, move. Julian Champagny, Marquise Noel, they don't have any problem moving off of undrafted guys if they don't crack it. But first round picks, for whatever reason, this team extends a lot of patience. Lucas Nogueira, Bruno Caboclo, Malachi Flynn. You cannot afford to have these guys be negatives on your roster for 3 years anymore. So I do think that there is some sort of, what is the worst version of you? It has to matter to some extent. And unfortunately, upside and floor are very linked. And play style and synergy. Do you fit us? This was a famous quote by Nick Nurse regarding Gary Trent. Do you fit us? If he plays this way, he fits us. If he doesn't, but look, you're not just throwing a random player on the court and asking them to play one-on-one. That's not how this works, right? Look at how the Denver Nuggets draft. Do you not believe that every single prospect goes through a vetting process of, do you fit Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr.? Do you fit our core? And that's not to say you draft for fit in terms of need, like, oh, we really need a center, so let's just grab the best center available. That's stupid. But play style and synergy has to matter. The Raptors have a style of offense that, quite frankly, requires a lot of basketball intelligence. So if you are a basketball dummy, you're going to fail in this system. That has to matter. It has to matter. You have to factor in for intelligence. You have to factor in for how you play. You want to play up and down fast. Maybe there's a certain prospect out there that a lot of people are really excited about that doesn't play too fast. And maybe he's going to struggle more in Darko Rajakovic's system than he would somewhere else. And that has to matter because you're sort of setting someone up to fail. You see what I mean? This is like in a relationship. See, if you, like, for instance, give a random example. Let's say you're a person out there who likes to, go, you want to be real active. You want to be really active every weekend. You want to go camping, hiking, rock climbing, all that stuff, right? You want to go skiing, snowboarding. You just want to be active. You want to play basketball, soccer. You're just always active and you want your partner to be active. you date somebody, you better ask really early if they want to be active, because if they're a homebody, you're setting yourself up for a lot of frustration and failure, frankly. And it's not going to be their fault when they don't want to join you on your 10th hike of the month. That's not their fault. It's the same thing. You want to play up and down, you want to play fast, you want to play quick read and react offense, you want to have a lot of pick and roll, you want to have a lot of force, you want to have spacers, movers, you want to have a lot of off ball cutting, you want to have a lot of screen setters. Well, you need to find players who actually fit what you're trying to do on the basketball court, because it's enough to say in a vacuum, this guy's a great prospect because he measures well and he runs fast. But does he actually blend into the players you already have? And is he going to be optimized in that situation? So I think that that matters. Moving on to what this draft actually presents. And then, so, I find that it's somewhat archaic to picture players as point guard, shooting guard, small forwards, power forwards, and centers. I don't think these positions really exist on the floor. And so I prefer to think of players in terms of archetypes. And there are many archetypes. And I don't think that I will do I don't think I'll do it justice today by talking about them, because I don't think I've sorted these well enough. But I think that you can think of one archetype as spacing, like players who provide a certain level of spacing through different means, right? Either through deep shooting, like Jared McCain, like deep shooting, Dalton Connect, shot making, Zachary Risache, high release point, tall shooter, potential down the line to play the four. All of these players can massively impact the angles that you have available. Reed Shepard creates a lot of spacing through intelligence and through shooting and through a little bit of deep shooting as well. Rob Dillingham through shot making. I think these players can positively impact space on the basketball court, which I think could be very, very useful. Some of them are defensive question marks. Some of them are straight up defensive liabilities. Rob Dillingham is a defensive liability. Zachary Risache obviously presents himself as more of a complete prospect, and which is why most people have Zachary Risache above Rob Dillingham in their mocks. Most, but not all. Some people have Zach falling all the way down to 12. And if he falls to the Raptors at 6, I think it'd be very, very hard for the Raptors to pass up on him. He's a very Raptors-y prospect. Then there are bigs, and there's all sorts of different bigs, right? And I mean, like, I feel it's so silly to even put a guy like Alex Sarr and Zach Edey on the same graphic just because they are quote unquote centers. I mean, Alex probably, has much more wing in his game than big, and Zach Edey is like a big from your grandpa's years, right? He would fit right into like the NBA in the 1980s and 1990s. But despite what people think about him as a post big, he actually isn't that great of a post player. I think he's much more comfortable as a roller. And with the Raptors' penchant for pick and roll, especially with guys like Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes, etc., could Zach Edey, despite all the compromises potentially in terms of pace, you'd have to slow it down for him. He doesn't shoot too well, even though there's some rumors that he might have a shot. This is the type of guy who would be such an elite lob threat, pass target on the pick and roll. Like, do you have the requisite ball handler to put the ball? You know what I mean? Like for instance, if the Raptors were to get like Nikola Topic and Zach Edey together, like let's say you get Topic at 4 and you get Zach Edey at 19. Would that be a really interesting, albeit very defensively compromised, but very, very, and probably not a very good shooting, but a very interesting, pick and roll duo off the bench? I don't know. That could be cool. There's a lot of, examples of, there's switchable bigs like switchable bigs like Alex Sarr, who could potentially even guard 4s, 3s, maybe, who can move their hips really well. There are raw prospects, right? Like Ulrich Komche, who could, very well be something, who could very well be nothing. Frankly, there are guys that really, really, really stuck out to me. Also really stuck out to me. Iguodaro, like in terms of just, I mean, I know that it's so low hanging fruit to compare him to to someone like Al Horford, because Al Horford is so present, given that we're watching the playoffs. But I think he has such a remarkable feel and intelligence for the game. How much are you going to prioritize that? How much are you going to prioritize scheme? in terms of how you want your bigs to play and what you currently have on the roster. I mean, you have Kelly Olynyk, you have Jakob Poeltl. Would it help to have, a really flexible big who maybe doesn't have as much size, but who can actually move his hips and present you that opportunity down the line? Or are we going to exclusively talk about the transition opportunities that some of these players have? Or do we talk about player archetypes? We talk about what's missing on your roster. Well, what has worked and what hasn't worked. Jonte Porter worked pretty well when he was playing and he wasn't gambling. So, do you look at a guy like Kyle Filipowski, who, albeit is not the defender that Jonte Porter was, but presents some of the same perks, in terms of shooting? Um, could Kyle Filipowski be a really, really interesting target for the Raptors at 19, especially if he falls a little bit? There's so many examples. Obviously, the player that I look to in this entire heap as like my favorite is Yves Missi. It's not just because he's Cameroonian. It's not just because I would suspect that the Raptors would be in love with this guy. It's just because he's really smart, really, really smart player. And I just always go towards intelligence when it comes to young players. It's why I like Christian Koloko so much. It's why I like Jonte Porter so much. It's why I like Scotty Barnes so much, frankly. And time again, I'm finding that intelligence works for the Raptors. Grady Dick's a really smart player as well, and that shows. And I just think that overall, with him, his combination of he could do it three different ways, is what I'm saying. He could do the drop stuff. He can be a little bit more switchable, and he can be a transition terror. Will he ever develop, a crazy jump shot? Will he be anything more than a Clint Capella? If at 19 you get Clint Capella in this draft, consider yourself a very, 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 very lucky person. And I think he'll actually be better than Clint Capella. And I know that's pretty much a hot take because Clint Capella has been a starting center in the NBA for a very long time. But yeah, like I love his athletic potential, and Iguodala is like Trace Jackson Davis, not a shooter. He actually has shown a little bit of shooting potential, which I think is interesting. Um, and yes, I understand the Trace Jackson Davis comparisons largely because they look alike. But I do think he's a little bit more Al Horford personally. But yeah. Okay, moving on. And then probably like a group of guys that I think maybe have the people most excited. And that is, your outside shot stars, right? Let's just say none of these guys are de facto A+ prospects, but they are the types of players that project into stars. I mean, you could also make a case for Zachary Rizzo-Shea and Alex Sarr as well to put them in this list. But you have a guy like Stephon Castle, right? And some people say Shea Gilgeous-Alexander light. Some people say he's more Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. I don't know. I don't know. I loved what I saw from him during the tournament. And I think his jump shot is going to come along. I think his mechanics are pretty good. I think he's a really, really solid pick for the Raptors if they pick him. Modest Buzelis of the G League Ignite. I think, again, this is a guy who has the size and skill that the Raptors really like. Raptors really like, going back right to Brian Colangelo, Andrea Bargnani, that draft. Size to skill ratio is something they talked about all the time. And Masai Ujiri was right there. So when you talk about the players, these guys have always prioritized size and skill, and that ratio between the two things, it really does favor almost every single player here. Isaiah Collier, right, of USC, did not have a great year, but came into this draft cycle as a top 5 projected pick. If he falls to 19, I think the Raptors will have a really, really hard time passing up on him, largely because of his athletic potential, possibly because of his attack potential in terms of like getting into the middle of the floor. There are question marks, of course, but there are question marks with all these players. I think some of the biggest question marks are with probably the best prospect on this board, which is Nikola Topic. Can he defend? Can he shoot? Is he going to be healthy? How will he adjust to the NBA? Will teams just sag off of him like he's TJ McConnell and dare him to shoot? And how much will he continue to be able to punish defenses in the NBA the way he's done in Europe? How much will the expanded floor space be able to help him? I think his relentless activity as a basketball player and his incredible vision for the game will make him a very, very good player. Now, there is a floor here, which is, not great. And there is a ceiling that he's the best player in this draft, and it's not close. So I think that, if I had to just blindly pick and just say what player has the most tools to be the best player in this draft, he's in the top 3 for me. He is definitely in the top 3 for me. Then you have Cody Williams and you have Ron Holland, guys with a lot of question marks in terms of shooting, scoring, but maybe guys that people feel a lot more comfortable with as top 5 picks because they look like top 5 picks. They have the size, they have the wingspan, they have the athleticism, they have the theoretical potential, but do they have the game? Do they have the in-between stuff? Do they have the vision? Do they have the intelligence? Do they have the drive, commitment, etc.? Cody Williams, of course, will get a little bit of a pop because of his brother. A lot of people have this sort of bias where they think, because the brother is one way, it runs in the genes. Well, to that I say, Jalen McDaniels is related to Jaden McDaniels. Case in point. Okay. RM33 saying Tristan Da Silva. Yes, that is another really good player. James is not a good defender or shooter. Well, I think he can shoot a little bit. He's not a great shooter, and his mechanics are a little bit funky, but I think Darko Rajakovic can help him. If Darko Rajakovic has helped, Mikal Bridges fix his jump shot. One thing I will tell you with him is he works incredibly hard, and he is an insane competitor. Like, he is a guy who impacts winning and will probably be one of the rare rookies who will positively or neutrally impact winning. I don't think he's losing minutes. And defensively, he will be massively compromised. And I think that is where the Raptors have gotten themselves into a little bit of trouble because, Grady's not a great defender. RJ's not a great defender. Emmanuel Quickley's not a great defender. And now you're moving towards a league that is allowing guys to hold, So we are moving into an NBA in which, if the rules stay the same, if the referees continue to ref games the way they've been refereeing them, it's a really scary proposition for the Toronto Raptors because you have a team that has predicated most of their success on off-ball movement, cutting, etc. And we are seeing in the playoffs, and we saw it towards the end of the regular season, that teams are just being allowed to hold cutters, and they're not calling it. They're not calling the bumps. They're not calling the screen, the peeling over screens and stuff. And so the Toronto Raptors are going to have to become more physical at a time when they have decided to go more finesse. Will that impact how they draft, right? Like, do you perhaps look at players like a Topic, who is very physical, or like an Isaiah Collier, who is very physical, and say, okay, these are the guys who might have a 10% boost in their success rate in the modern NBA, in the new NBA, in this more physical, scrappy, get hit every time you go, for a drive NBA. Are these guys going to be more successful? You could also look at a guy like Zach Edey, who was beat the shit out of all year, and say, is he maybe now more successful in the NBA, where scoring is now lower due to the physicality? Is a Zach Edey, post up or rim roll or layup or whatever, provided you believe that he can continue to be somewhat efficient. He wasn't the most efficient for his size at the college level, but is that maybe going to factor into how you draft? Topic is a great example of a guy who can spray to the corners for threes. And because, you would just have to make sure that physically he is a guy who you trust. But he has a lot of Jalen Brunson in his game, man. I got to tell you, a lot of Jalen Brunson in his game. So, you may see him as a weak shooter. Kyle Lowry was a weak shooter coming out of Villanova. Is he a weak shooter now? Not really. So things can change. He's 18, 19 years old. I think, you need to be a little bit more patient with him. The same thing goes for Cody Williams. He can up his, none of these guys have broken jump shots, is what I'm saying. Here are the pros to losing the pick. $7 to $12 million more cap space in the summer where you're under the cap. Okay. The Raptors won't be under the cap next year with Scotty Barnes' contract extension kicking in, with Emmanuel Quickley's contract kicking in this summer. You're not going to be under the cap again for a very, very long time, provided you don't completely tear this thing down. So you have a very, very small pocket in which to utilize cap space. You can utilize cap space in a lot of different ways. You can sign somebody, unlikely, or you can take undesirable contracts and add assets to it. Okay. So let's say that you lose this pick, right? You have $12 million. That's $12 million. Maybe there's a team that is over the tax and they don't want their $12 million and they're willing to give you a 2025 top 10 protected pick. Now you have 2 picks. You have 2 picks next year. Willing to take that deal? Maybe. Don't think of it this way. A lot of people have incorrectly said that you lost Fred VanVleet for nothing. Did you really? A team that lost a player for nothing? The Dallas Mavericks. They lost Jalen Brunson for nothing. But did they really lose him for nothing? I mean, if you think about it, yeah, the transaction was Jalen Brunson walks, you get nothing. You didn't get a draft pick, you didn't get a first round pick, and that feels bad. But the truth is, it opened the door for Kyrie. And would Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic have ever succeeded the way Kyrie and Luka are? Probably not. So, if the Dallas Mavericks win a championship, guess what? They lost a top 5 MVP winner in the past 2 years for nothing. It's the same thing with the Raptors and, losing Pascal for 3 draft picks and Bruce Brown and the potential of what that Bruce Brown contract could bring, as well as, losing OG, losing Fred, etc. It's like these are only losses if you don't do anything with what you've gained. And what you've gained is flexibility. What you've gained is cap space. What you've gained. So losing this pick opens up a 12, potentially $7 to $12 million. Because if you get the first overall pick, you're on the hook for $12 million. That's $12 million. That's eating away into your cap space, right? There is the second thing, which is the pressure of living up to the lofty top 6 expectations can sink players, especially when those players are probably, in terms of actual talent, mid-first round picks. You take a guy like Nikola Topic at number 1, when he's probably much, much closer to a 7th or 8th overall type talent. You take a guy like Alex Sarr as a number 1 overall pick and start comparing him to Victor Wembanyama because they're French and they both went number 1. Well, that can be a lot of pressure on a young mind. I'm reminded every single day. I'm 36 years old, going on 37 later this year. Even I sometimes mentally struggle with the consequences of dealing with certain pressures outside, what people expect of me, whatever. This is even harder when you talk about a player like an Alex Sarr or Nikola Topic coming from a different country as 19, 20-year-olds and having to live up to these expectations. And you can say these young men are very exceptional because they're great at basketball. That doesn't mean that they're not 19 or 20. We've seen this with Scotty Barnes. These growing pains do happen. And for Scotty, it's different because he didn't have the pressure of being a number 1 overall pick. I wonder if Scotty would have succeeded as a number 1 overall pick in Detroit. I personally think he would have, but there's a world in which he doesn't, right? So everything happens for a reason. But I have to say that there is this additional pressure of being a really, really high pick. Fans put it on you. Organization typically puts it on you. I hope the Raptors won't. Media puts it on you. And, when you look at what Grady Dick went through, would Grady Dick have gone through the immense scrutiny that he did had he not been a 13th overall pick? Had he been like a 22nd overall pick? Nobody would have cared. Nobody would have cared if he'd been a 22nd overall pick, but he was a lottery pick. And, is that his fault? No. He was a lottery pick for a reason. He was a former Gatorade Player of the Year for a reason. And he is a very, very good young prospect for a reason. And the Raptors picked him 13th overall for a reason. But that doesn't mean that right away. And if Grady Dick is a lesser person, Grady Dick does not bounce back from that. Because the way he started last season was abysmal. And a lot of people were calling him a bust after 20 games. I think he'd played 320 minutes. This is where I draw the line in terms of the NBA media. It's crazy. The flexibility to trade future picks, shudder. Yes, the Toronto Raptors, the minute they convey this pick, will immediately, unencumbered, be able to trade future draft picks. Now, do you want to do that? I don't know. But if there was a trade, like for a Donovan Mitchell or something, and you thought to yourself, hey, we can make a competitive offer around, I don't know, RJ Barrett, Bruce Brown, and like 3 first-round picks. Well, if you found that Donovan Mitchell actually wanted to come here and you wanted to do that and have one of the smallest backcourts ever in Donovan Mitchell and Emmanuel Quickley, and just I'm not saying you should do this trade. I'm just saying if you wanted to do this trade, you suddenly can, and you automatically retain the 2025 pick, which is likely top 15, which is a very, very good player. And picking 9th next year is not a bad thing. Picking 10th next year is not a bad thing. But guess what? If you don't convey the pick this year, you can't pick 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th next year. You will convey that pick to the Spurs, and it will be a very good pick, and it will be a very good player. And unless you clear top 16, top 17, you're probably going to be surrendering a pick next year and surrendering a player next year to the Spurs that has a greater chance of being an all-star than the player you pick with this pick right now. So that's the downline. Here are the pros to keeping the pick, I believe. or the cons to losing the pick. Fan sentiment. This is just purely emotional. We've been through a lot this year. Now we got to lose the pick too for Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl's overpaid. That's just fan sentiment. The value of now, having one extra year of development under Darko Rajakovic and Jama Malalelo versus, having that development happen somewhere else puts you one step closer towards being ready for that 2027, 2028, 2026 season when the Raptors start to like really, really push for contention. So having that player in now versus having that player in next year, if you consider every draft pick as a hypothetical what if you consider every single draft prospect as a 30% to 40% likely they're going to turn into nothing, 5% they're going to turn into a superstar, 5% they're going to turn into an all-star. If you start to look at players like a compendium of odds as opposed to like a surefire, like don't be an idiot, right? You can say this guy's going to be great, this guy's going to be terrible, but you're just wrong. It's just an opinion. You might be right, you might be wrong, but at every single time there's always the potential of both. And so you have to see everything as odds, right? So this is a coffee mug, it's a circle, draw the circle in half. The ultimate prospect is boom bust, right? But there are a lot of prospects that have a lot of gray areas in them, right? So I think that the sooner a player gets into the Raptors pipeline, there is some value in immediacy, especially if you are trying to contend or build a contender around Scotty now, because you're going to have to make a recruiting pitch to this guy in 4 years. You won't have to this year because he'll sign the contract this year. But in 4 years, you're going to actually have to make a pitch for him to stay here and not go to Miami or not go to LA or not go somewhere else. And you better have like a pretty competitive team around him because this guy cares about winning a lot. Good to come in with two other rookies. And I think this is a bit of an underrated thing, but is it a good thing? Wait, cons to losing the pick. Hold on. I just want to make sure that I'm not screwing myself over in terms of linguistics here. The point here is that sometimes it's harder to be young in a vacuum. It helps. There's a lot of young players that have talked about the benefits of coming in with another young player, into the league and having that, growing stuff. Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam are the most famous example in Raptors. In the Raptors, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter. There's a lot of guys, that, and DeMar is the complete opposite, where, he came in as a lone rookie. There wasn't really a lot around him in terms of young players, and he was very lonely in his first year. And so, DeMar succeeded. All of these guys succeeded, and that's why we're talking about them. But, sometimes it does help to come in with another young guy. Scotty came in with Delano Banton. I'm sure that helped him in his first year, right? So anyways, and the potential trade asset, right? So, did I just do the same thing twice? Sorry, I'm having a mental fart where like I'm not really fully understanding what I'm talking about here, but like in terms of potential trade asset lost, if you keep the pick, right? If you were to keep the pick, I just think it's weirdly worded because it's double negative. It's like a con to losing the pick. So really what I'm trying to talk about here is if you lose the pick, what negative things occur? The potential trade asset loss, which is to say that if hypothetically you were to pick first, second, third, fourth, or sixth, you would have some flexibility in terms of being able to trade that pick now with Bruce Brown for something. And that is a pretty good package to get something, I believe, because so much of what a package is comes down to, and because I think the argument against that is, of course, that this draft is branded as bad, right? It's branded as a weak draft. Everyone I've ever talked to about this draft has said it's a weak draft. It's a weak draft. It's a thought that is just not examined. People who've never seen a single player from this draft say it's a weak draft. I assure you, it is not a weak draft. It is just an incomplete draft. It does not have superstars, but it's not a weak draft at all. But because it has the tag of weak draft, maybe that top pick that you're thinking about doesn't actually retain a tremendous amount of value. And to go back to this element, which is pick number, the third one, you actually, I've always said this, your future picks don't mean as much as other teams' future picks. Just like the San Antonio Spurs' future picks won't mean as much. People expect the San Antonio Spurs to be really good in 3 years. People expect the Phoenix Suns to be really bad in 3 years. That's the difference. People can do the math for themselves. They're not stupid. So the Raptors around Scotty Barnes with this elite management in place, or reputedly, good management in place, there is an expectation that your 2028 pick that you might be dangling in a trade just isn't going to be worth a lot because the Raptors are going to be good. So I think that matters. Moving on to, hang on one second. The hidden perks and holes of 19. So one thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is, when you pick later in the draft, it really does matter who goes ahead of you because, chances are that old Daryl Morey quote, it helps to work in a league where 7 teams don't know what they're doing. A lot of teams know what they're doing right now. I'm telling you, they do. You can see it from the trades that they don't make. You can see it from the trades they do make. You can see it from the signings that they get every single year. Often, over the last 2 years, it's felt like the Raptors were one of the teams that didn't know what the fuck they were doing. But when it comes to the draft, Orlando is a very, very good pick, good team in terms of that. But I think because the Orlando Magic are so stacked with young players, I don't even know if they'll keep that pick. They already have so many. They have Jet Howard, they have Anthony Black, they have so many. OKC is another team that is just stacked with young players. I'm not sure if one of these two teams doesn't go for like a super old college player because they're not enamored with any young players. New Orleans is one of the best drafting teams in the league, and Miami's a really good drafting team as well. So those are the teams between 12 and 18 that are picking right behind you. So chances are, if you're targeting a player, they're probably targeting the same player, and guess what? They're picking before you. So that's a hole of 19. There's a perk of 19, which is you have great potential to trade up or trade back by packaging picks plus contracts. 19 is a really interesting, I'd love to see a study on this, but I feel like picks between 16 and 23 get moved a lot. And 19 falls smack dab in the middle of that. It's a very small contract. It possesses a ton of value. If you look historically, this is usually a place where older players, injury concerned players tend to be drafted. And there is a chance that something really, really good falls to you at this place. But also there's a chance that someone falls in love with someone at this place too. Like look at Cam Whitmore, OG Anunoby, guys like this, they fell to these spots, right? So this is a great place where if a team falls in love with a player, you might be holding a pretty big asset on your hands on draft night, where maybe they're willing to give you something of really significant future value for this 19th overall pick. Now, I know if Raptor fans are going to lose their freaking minds collectively if the Raptors trade out of this draft, but you never know what you're being offered and by whom, right? And then finally, flexibility to use the pick to move off of less desirable contracts plus Bruce component. So the Bruce component is moving up potentially, right? So if another team has maybe a longer term contract that they're not enamored with, 19 plus Bruce Brown might be able to get you 13, 12, 11, etc. So you might be able to trade up in this draft if someone that you really like is falling with that 19th pick plus something. That's what I'm saying. The Bruce and you might also be able to move back in this draft or move out of this draft completely by using this 19th pick as an asset value. Again, a lot of times when it comes down to trades, it comes down to what can I sell to my fan base? If you're OKC or you're Dallas or whatever, you have to sell this move to your fan base. You have to get some sort of approval from your ownership or whatever. A 19th pick plus Bruce Brown, who still has a little bit of championship stain on him from last year's run with the Nuggets, especially if the Nuggets fail this year. A lot of this talk will be, oh, they didn't have Bruce Brown. I think that subconsciously sort of helps Bruce's case. I know that people who've watched him this year probably would say he's washed, but he's 27 years old. He's definitely not washed. He's not 32 or 33 where you're like, oh, the end is near. No, I think there's still a lot of teams out there that see him as a valuable, cog to their bench. And maybe he just wasn't unlocked properly with the Raptors or with Indiana. Do not also remove the fact that that convertible contract of his is a very rare asset in the NBA. So, there is that, possibility where you could package Bruce plus a Chris Boucher plus a Jalen McDaniels and get like a really large contract and use the 19th pick as a sweetener, something of that sort. Um, finally, the final slide is undrafted talent. I think there is a unique and perhaps disproportionately large number of players that I really like between 45 and like 75. This includes guys like Bronny James, who you may or may not feel is an NBA player, but certainly could be worth a look as a, undrafted free agent. There's a Javon Freeman Liberty on this team who I expect to remain on this team. There's Grady Dick, there's Ochai Abaji. So you kind of have like a big roster spot maybe that's open, and the Raptors, tried to fill it many, many times this year. They just couldn't. Jonte Porter, etc. But maybe a guy like Baba Miller from Florida State University, who has a lot of interesting basketball tools in terms of things that the Raptors would really value. Maybe he's the type of guy that slips into the undrafted heap, and he would have a great connection to the Raptors because the Raptors already have a connection to FSU through Scotty Barnes, and Scotty Barnes is very familiar with Baba Miller. So, um, yeah, I think that's interesting. You could find a significant value in the undrafted pool, especially with prospects in the 40 to 60 range who request not to be traded. The openings exist due to Porter, Koloko, Harper, Noel not working out. So the Raptors do have some two-way spots that are open, and the excellent reputation for development is something that the Raptors kind of lost last year, but I think they might have gotten it back. I think a lot of teams, a lot of agents that actually pay attention to who takes care of the young players, who invests in their young players, who has the facilities, who has the athletic, training centers, who has the right development coaches, who's doing the right stuff with the diet and nutrition, whatever. Look, man, when you are an agent, and I've talked to a lot of agents and I've talked to a lot of trainers, over the last 3 years doing this, and even before that, when you are the agent of a superstar like an Anthony Edwards, you're just thinking market, you're thinking opportunity, you're thinking perks, you're thinking this stuff. When you're the agent or the trainer of a guy like a Jeff Doughton, Ron Harper, Jonte Porter, etc., you're just thinking about sustaining. You're thinking about extending. You're thinking about just getting another contract. That eventually comes down to, will you be giving my client an opportunity? Is there an existing pipeline for them to get reps, i.e. the 905? Do you have a track record of calling up your 905 guys? Do you have a track record of, giving guys in the Exhibit 10 deals and whatever a fair shot? Do you have a track record of making guys better so that my guy can get a contract somewhere else? We made Delano Banton better. We poured 2 years into him, and now he's probably going to get a contract somewhere else. He's on his third year. That's a development story. We are not so far removed from the Norman Powell's, Fred VanVleet's of the world that people have completely wiped out this idea of Toronto as a good place for young players. That's why Marquise Noel was so excited about being here, even though now he's gone. That's why Justin Champagnie chose to be here. Of course, at some point, this is going to end. You lose the reputation if you don't maintain it. But I do believe that, if there is a player in that Trace Jackson Davis mold who slips to 35, 40, and again, just reiterating this for the 95th time for everyone in the back row, just because it's a weak draft doesn't mean it's a weak draft all throughout. I really like players 20 through 60 in this draft. Like, there's so many like really interesting, could be awesome type of players. Like, there's a world of Thaddeus Youngs and Leonard Miller types, across this draft. That's a hell of a player to get as your 10th or 11th roster spot. Okay. Look at how the Denver Nuggets have gone through Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, Julian Strawther. Like, there's so many, right? Like, those are all end of first round guys, right? Nikola Jovic. We saw Nikola Jovic starting. He was the 27th overall pick just a couple years ago, right? Jaime Jaquez. He was a late teens pick. Just last year, he was a rookie. Cason Wallace, he was like we're seeing Cason Wallace, Derek Lively playing rotation minutes in the Western Conference semifinals, and they were late lottery picks last year who, were underclassmen. They were freshmen. So again, a lot to think about there. I will see you guys tomorrow at 2:30 or 2 o'clock. We'll see 2 o'clock or 2:30 for the show. Hopefully we'll have like 70, 80 people right away, and then we'll probably build it up to 500-600 people. We will show it live. We'll figure out a way to do it where it's live on the screen and you'll be able to watch it here, react here. We'll have call-ins, all that good stuff, right? Rank Scrub saying, just got to say that Jalen Harris is putting up 50 points, 50-point games in G League. You only need a couple of combo guards to excel. Truth. Any hope that Koloko to return? Yes. Carter and McCain, doubtful. Available at 19. Ryan Dunn at 19 is probable. Won't know yet. Ulrich is really interesting. I had to Google how to say his name. It's a German name, even though he's a Cameroonian prospect. King Kylie, when's the last time we did that kind of trade? Get a bad player, but a pick in return because of our cap. Feels like Bobby would rather have cap flexibility. Yeah, because they were trying to maintain the championship core. The rule book has been thrown out. Look, I want to say one thing to sort of end this live. And it kind of goes back to something that happened between Michael Grange and Masai Ujiri. And this is going to be my final point of this draft as we extend into the 1 hour. And, there's a game starting and probably started 5 minutes ago. So let me just wrap this up real quick. I believe that if the Raptors retain their draft pick this year, there's a really, 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 really good case to tank hard next year. And by tank hard, I mean like you tank so freaking hard. Like you immediately start thinking about moving Jakob Poeltl. You think about starting, if you draft first, second, or third in this draft, like you pick Alex Sarr or Zachary Risacher or something like that, I would start those guys and lose every game humanly possible. I would be the Detroit Pistons and the Washington Wizards of the world. I would run schemes that would be designed to help me lose games. I would lose everything I could. The idea that you could potentially add a Cooper Flag to this team is worth it. It is. It totally is. I promise you it is. I'm not saying he's Wemby, but the way he fits with what you want to do on the basketball court, it would change your trajectory forever. Like you would have and he can play right away and he won't contribute to losing. He'll win right away. He'll be in that Scotty Winshare equation. So yeah, I would talk to Scotty right away and be like, hey, I know we promised you it would be 1 year and then we try to win. I know they won't do it, but they should do it. They really should. Anyways, I'll talk to y'all later. Time to watch some playoffs, and I'll see you guys after the games today. I'm going to do multiple lives today. If you didn't check out the Denver Nuggets post game last night, if you have some time, definitely check it out. If you didn't check out the video I did a couple of days ago, Scotty Barnes, the 5 things he needs to improve, definitely go check that out. And I hope that you will be here tomorrow at 2:30 so we can have that collective meltdown together as a fan base, just as we have had meltdowns over the trade deadline, just like we had a meltdown over Grady Dick being the pick last year, et cetera, et cetera. And if the Raptors do keep their pick tomorrow, I promise you that you get a ton of draft content over the next month and a half to keep you engaged and informed. Hit the like button. Yes, sir. Prediction for today. I don't have predictions for today. I'm out of the betting game. But I can tell you, I have no idea if Luka's playing today. But if Luka's playing, I think the Dallas Mavericks win it. If he's not playing or if he's really injured, OKC probably steals one. And yeah, Cleveland, Boston. I expect Boston to come out with force. All right, talk to y'all later. Giddy starting. OKC is cooked. Shit. Yeah. All right. Talk to y'all later, man. Peace.